He's not a player most fans in the state of hockey have ever heard of. But the fact is, Cleve Bennewitz was a founding father of the sport in Minneapolis. Cleve's mother, a Dutch immigrant, taught her son how to skate on the Middle River in the late 1800s in Argyle, Minnesota. Cleve moved to Minneapolis as an 18-year-old in 1901, where he organized the first club team in the city of Lakes. The Lake Shores first played on Lake Calhoun on a smooth skating surface that froze overnight after a local company cut ice there daily. Cleve took care of ordering the Lake Shores uniforms and kept the original receipt in his scrapbook. Sweaters, stockings, and caps for 10 players with a total of $49.75. A major investment at the time that paid off. By 1903, the Lake Shores had gained a national reputation as the fastest team in the Northwest.
Lake Calhoun was a very, very synonymous rink that was played a lot of early games. There was newspaper accounts that talked about they would play there, and they didn't have what they called banking boards, which are now, of course, boards that we're all accustomed to seeing. There was a snowbank, and they talked about how they had to chase the puck all the way to the Minneapolis Club across the lake to get the puck back.
In 1906, Cleve Bennewitz decided to rectify that situation. He and the Lake Shores raised funds to buy lumber to construct banking boards, as they were called, another first in city history. The lumber set them back $24.19. No member of the Lake Shores got paid. They played the game because they loved to. Soon after, other teams formed in Minneapolis, including the Wanderers and the Harriets from neighboring Lake Harriet. By 1918, hockey had taken the city by storm. In a newspaper article entitled Hockey, Minneapolis' own sport, a writer examined the attention of an ever-increasing army of fans devoted to the game, adding, "Minneapolis, the Northland's metropolis, has done much to build up this game nationally," concluding it probably has more amateur hockey teams than any city in the country. The city of Lakes was a perfect fit for hockey at a time when scheduling games could take weeks. Cleve Bennewitz had to reach out to potential opponents by telegram and the U.S. mail. As more and more athletes were drawn to the game, a flood of new rinks emerged, most notably the Hippodrome at the State Fairgrounds in 1912. At the time, it was the largest indoor ice rink in the world. Minneapolis entered the indoor ice market in a big way of its own in 1924. The Minneapolis Arena provided what was termed reliable ice conditions for the University of Minnesota, the Minneapolis Millers, the city's first professional franchise, the Minneapolis Bruins, as well as high school teams in the city. Located a block north of Lake and DuPont Avenues, it was the centerpiece of hockey in the city for 40 years, till it was demolished in 1966. The Millers and later Minneapolis Rockets were various incarnations of professional teams that played from 1916 to 1962. At one point, the Millers tried but failed to join the NHL. In 1963, the Minneapolis Bruins arrived, the top farm team of the Boston Bruins. They relocated after 3 seasons with a roster that included recognizable stars, Cesar Maniago and J.P. Parisi, who joined the North Stars just a few years later. As interest in the game grew, so did the size of these new buildings. The University of Minnesota added the Williams Arena rink in 1949. A year after the demolition of the Minneapolis Arena, the city invested $16 million to upgrade the Minneapolis Auditorium downtown to include an ice arena. That building served as a longtime home of the Minneapolis City Conference and still holds happy memories for some of the greatest high school stars in city history.
The rink that they set up, was chicken wire. There was no plexiglass. It was plastic-coated cyclone fencing, basically. So you didn't want to get rubbed out. By 8 o'clock at night, there'd be over 6,000 people ready for the tilt, and it was packed.
That was the other side of being part of the Minneapolis hockey community. Rivalry with other schools, but except when a guy like Reed Larson was playing in the NHL, you'd point and say, well, that guy, he's from Minneapolis, just like me. And so you took some pride in that. It was something to brag about when Minneapolis hockey players made it big.
A lot of great players, guys that have played in the Olympics, guys that have played and won Stanley Cups, Tom Shorsky and the Reed Larsons and the Rick Erdals, those type of guys that came out of the city and were great players. And I just figured that, you know, those were the guys that I looked up to. I wanted to be like them when I was a younger guy and wanted to copy what they did.
You looked at these kids from the other neighborhoods as real rivals, and it was competitive and fierce and everything you want in a rivalry.
For coming from Edison and growing up Northeast, when we looked at places like Southwest Minneapolis, we thought that was, you know, on the other side of the earth at the time, and we thought, you know, the Southwest was, you know, always the powerhouse in hockey, and it had been 50 plus years since Edison had beaten Southwest. And so when my group of friends got up, our ages got up to high school, my sophomore year, we beat Southwest the first time in 50 years, and that was something that we celebrated. It was like it was the Stanley Cup.
In 1970, Minneapolis Southwest, led by goaltender Brad Shellstead, became the first and only Minneapolis City Conference team to win the state high school championship, beating Edina 1-0 in overtime. In the years that followed, the hockey landscape changed in Minneapolis. Suburban schools dominated the game, and the City Conference, once a thriving 10-team collection, was reduced to a single co-op squad based at Parade Ice Garden. The city of Minneapolis has played an important role in the history of hockey in our state, with Hall of Famers, Stanley Cup and Olympic champs who started their careers in the largest city in Minnesota. And it all started with an 18-year-old pioneer named Cleve Bennewitz, whose love for the sport led him to organize the Lake Shores, the first of many teams and a multitude of great players that called Minneapolis home.